Wouldn't it be like the most petty, humiliating, yet startling thing if I just fired my...
What if everything you thought you knew about the Andy Griffith Show, the laughter, the love, the charm of Mayberry, was only part of the story? Behind the warm glow of black and white nostalgia lay a world of tension, off-screen feuds, clever illusions, and a child star quietly preparing for greatness. This is the untold story of Ron Howard's transformation from wide-eyed Opie to one of Hollywood's most respected directors, and the secrets, struggles, and surprises that made it all possible. Buckle up, because we're pulling back the curtain on the show that seemed perfect until you looked closer. For decades, fans have cherished the Andy Griffith Show as the embodiment of wholesome Americana, a place where laughter came easy, life was simple, and Mayberry felt like home. But what if we told you that behind the picket fences and Southern charm, there were tensions, secrets, emotional complexities, and stories that never made it to air? Even Ron Howard, red-headed boy who played Opie, has opened up about what most fans never noticed. Today, we peel back the curtain and reveal the full story behind the show, the people, and the boy who grew up to become one of Hollywood's most respected directors. When the Andy Griffith Show premiered in 1960, few could have predicted its enduring impact. It ran for 8 seasons, produced 249 episodes, 159 in black and white and 90 in color, and became one of the few shows in history to end its run ranked #1. Alongside classics like I Love Lucy and Seinfeld, it holds a place in television royalty. But behind that crown lies a story of heartache, effort, unspoken feuds, and a little boy who had to grow up faster than anyone imagined. Ron Howard may have been America's favorite kid, but his journey was far from ordinary. Born March 1st, 1954, into a showbiz family, his father, Rance Howard, an actor and writer, his mother, Jean, a former actress, Ron was practically raised on set. By 5 years old, he already had a resume many adult actors would envy. His breakout came as Opie Taylor, the son of Sheriff Andy Taylor, in the fictional town of Mayberry. To millions, Ron was the freckled boy fishing with his dad and learning life lessons from a wise sheriff. But for Ron, Mayberry was never just a town. It was a studio lot, lined with painted flats and plywood facades. The buildings looked real on screen, but one gust of wind, and you'd see the illusion start to crumble. Streets sometimes changed shape. Windows flapped like paper. Cars mysteriously moved between shots. It was all held together by old-school TV magic and a lot of duct tape. Even the best-laid gags on the Andy Griffith Show were more stunt than spontaneity. Not accidents, but intricate bits of stagecraft pulled off by a crew that knew how to make magic out of mayhem. Like the iconic moment when Barney Fife's motorcycle sidecar broke loose and careened off dramatically. To viewers, it looked like the ultimate comedic mishap, perfectly in character for Don Knotts' jittery deputy. But the truth is, it was a precisely choreographed scene. Hidden wooden blocks were placed beneath the contraption to support it just enough until the right moment, when the sidecar was meant to collapse in a burst of chaos. It was a practical effect rooted in old-school slapstick, and it worked like a charm. Then there's the infamous drunk chicken episode from Aunt Bee the Crusader. In the storyline, one of the chickens gets into a stash of moonshine and starts wobbling around the yard like it had one too many. But rest assured, no poultry was harmed or intoxicated in the making of that scene. Instead, the crew tied a nearly invisible line to the chicken's head, gently tugging it off camera to create the illusion of drunken staggering. It was simple, clever, and effective, a hallmark of how low-tech solutions could bring unforgettable comedy to life. These weren't isolated cases either. Throughout the series, the crew frequently leaned on practical illusions and in-camera tricks to sell their gags. Props were sometimes designed to fall apart at the perfect moment, like a drawer flying open too far or a hat flying off in a gust of wind. In some scenes, off-camera hands helped close doors or adjust props mid-shot, a detail barely noticeable at the time but glaringly obvious in modern high-definition replays. Sometimes, the show even attempted visual sleight of hand with the actors themselves. In one episode where Aunt Bee learns to drive, producers tried to hide a stunt double under a large hat, hoping audiences wouldn't notice the obvious swap. Today, with clearer footage, it's easier than ever to spot the trick, but rather than ruin the illusion, it adds to the show's enduring charm. These low-budget tricks remind us that Mayberry wasn't just about good writing or strong acting. It was about invention. It was the art of making the unbelievable feel absolutely real. And that's a magic few shows have ever replicated. The real illusions weren't always physical. Sometimes they lived in the performances, the relationships between characters, and the effort it took to make Mayberry feel real. Ron Howard was learning not just how to act, but how to read people, watch how they worked, and absorb the subtle art of storytelling. His biggest influence, his father, Rance. Rance played only minor roles on the show. He was a constant presence on set, a mentor mentor, guide, and grounding force. In one memorable episode, Rance's character simply vanishes mid-scene. The reason? An off-screen emergency forced him to leave mid-filming, creating a continuity error that still gets talked about by eagle-eyed fans today. It was a small moment, but one that taught Ron volumes about professionalism, preparation, and grace under pressure. These weren't lessons learned in a classroom. They were taught between takes, under hot lights, with camera crews watching. Ron's childhood wasn't schoolyards and sleepovers. It was scripts, call sheets, and rehearsals. How lucky was I, Ron later said, to grow up in that situation where the actors were set up to participate and make suggestions. But not every lesson came easy, and not every co-star was as warm as Andy Griffith. One of Ron's most difficult on-set relationships was with Frances Bavier, who played the beloved Aunt Bee. To audiences, she was the glue that held the Taylor family together, a nurturing, apron-wearing icon. But to young Ron, she was distant, rigid, and cold. While she wasn't outwardly cruel, she rarely showed warmth to him off-camera. Even during the infamous pickle episode, where Opie had to eat jar after jar of Aunt Bee's homemade pickles, Ron's misery was real. He hated pickles. Multiple takes meant multiple bites, with Frances Bavier just feet away, not offering so much as a smile. The tension between Frances Bavier and the rest of the cast went deeper than a few offhand disagreements. Known for her meticulous standards and strict boundaries, Bavier had a reputation that often clashed with the easygoing, collaborative atmosphere Andy Griffith tried to foster on set. She approached her work with absolute seriousness, methodical, exacting, and unyielding. While that level of commitment led to the iconic, deeply authentic portrayal of Aunt Bee, it also made her difficult to direct and even harder to approach. Director and co-star Howard Morris, who played Ernest T. Bass, once described working with Bavier as navigating a landmine. Something as simple as asking her to shift position for a camera angle could ignite tension. She didn't tolerate spontaneity well, and any perceived disrespect to her process was met with quiet resistance or cold indifference. Many co-stars simply learned to tiptoe around her, careful not to trigger her notoriously prickly disposition. And yet, her distance wasn't rooted in malice. Bavier was deeply private and socially reserved. Raised in New York and classically trained, she brought a theatrical discipline to her television work, a world where fast-paced schedules and improvisation were often the norm. That mismatch sometimes made her feel isolated among the more relaxed Southern set cast. While Andy Griffith was known for being warm, jovial, and open, Bavier often kept to herself between takes, retreating to her dressing room with little interest in socializing. The divide between Bavier and Griffith reached its peak when Griffith attempted to bridge the gap with a surprise visit to her home, a gesture of reconciliation. He hoped for a warm welcome, or at least a chance to clear the air. Instead, it backfired. Bavier was furious. To her, the unannounced visit wasn't a friendly overture. It was a breach of the privacy she had fiercely guarded her entire life. The encounter only deepened the rift between them. Yet, in one of the show's most poignant behind-the-scenes chapters years later, as Bavier neared the end of her life and battled illness, she called Griffith. In a soft, reflective moment, she apologized. "I'm sorry we didn't get along better," she said. "It was my fault." That single act of vulnerability closed a wound decades old, offering a final note of grace in a relationship that had long remained unresolved. But in a final twist worthy of Mayberry's tender spirit, Bavier reached out to Griffith before her death in 1989. Battling illness and age, she called him to apologize. "I'm sorry we didn't get along better," she said. "It was my fault." That phone call brought closure to decades of quiet resentment, a last breath of peace in a story that had never fully healed. Still, the relationships that did work helped shape something far greater than a sitcom. Andy Griffith and Don Knotts, who played the lovable but bumbling Barney Fife, had chemistry that couldn't be faked. They were true friends, often improvising and elevating scenes with real affection. When Knotts left the show after 5 years, it wasn't just a professional blow, it was an emotional one. Griffith later admitted, "It wasn't the same without him." And then there was Ron Howard, soaking in every dynamic, every beat, every tension. Behind that angelic face was a boy balancing school, work, fame, and the weight of being everyone's favorite good kid. Wherever he went, people saw Opie, not Ron. He longed to be a normal child, to ride bikes, hang out, and just be him. But fame doesn't allow many off days. If he wasn't filming, he was prepping for the next episode, or attending press events, or simply trying to exist under the weight of public expectation. Yet he never cracked, not publicly. With the guidance of his parents, and especially his father, Ron kept a strong head on his shoulders. He wasn't forced into acting. He wasn't used as a meal ticket. Rance and Gene Howard made sure of that. They instilled humility, discipline, and, above all, curiosity. That burning curiosity eventually pulled Ron Howard away from the front of the camera and toward something bigger, a seat behind it. Even as he charmed audiences as Richie Cunningham on Happy Days, Ron was quietly observing the rhythms of directing, the pacing of scenes, the way stories were sculpted in the edit room. His fascination wasn't with fame. It was with how the stories were built. He enrolled at the University of Southern California's prestigious School of Cinematic Arts, but in true Hollywood fashion, he never graduated. Life moved faster than the syllabus, and Ron was already getting offers. What he craved couldn't be taught in a classroom. He needed real sets, real pressure, real mistakes. A chance came in 1977 through a clever, career-changing deal with legendary B-movie producer Roger Corman. Corman was infamous in the industry for launching the careers of future greats, from Martin Scorsese to James Cameron, by giving them small budgets, short deadlines, and creative freedom. Ron proposed a trade. He would star in Corman's comedy action flick Eat My Dust if he could direct his own film afterward. Corman agreed. The result was Grand Theft Auto, a wild, chaotic, low-budget car chase movie that Howard co-wrote with his father, Rance. Shot in just 15 days, the film featured exploding vehicles, over-the-top stunts, and frantic pacing. It was far from prestige cinema, but it was undeniably Ron's. He wasn't just acting anymore. He was directing traffic, managing crews, solving problems, and making split-second decisions that would define the final cut. And it worked. Grand Theft Auto was a commercial success, earning over $15 million on a modest $600,000 budget. More importantly, it showed Hollywood that Howard had vision. He wasn't just the red-headed kid from Mayberry or the clean-cut teen from Happy Days. He was a filmmaker with potential. That scrappy debut cracked open doors that would never close again. It taught him the value of resourcefulness, the art of managing chaos, and most importantly, the power of taking creative risks. It was the first step in a directing journey that would eventually lead to some of the most acclaimed films of a generation. But it all started with a bet, a handshake, and a bunch of wrecked cars. From there, the career snowballed. Night Shift in 1982, Splash in 1984. Then came the critical and box office juggernaut A Beautiful Mind in 2001, winning Best Picture and earning Ron Howard an Oscar for Best Director. But with success came scrutiny. The film omitted certain truths about mathematician John Nash's life, including his bisexuality and complex personal history. Howard admitted he focused on the heart of the story, but not everyone was pleased. Criticism didn't shake him, but it stayed with him, a reminder that when you tell someone else's story, you're carrying their burden too. That lesson came back years later when Howard adapted J.D. Vance's memoir, Hillbilly Elegy, for Netflix. At the time, Vance wasn't yet a politician. Howard focused on grit, resilience, and family hardship. But as Vance rose in political ranks, Howard watched disillusioned, as the man he once tried to understand changed before his eyes. It wasn't just political disappointment, it was personal. Howard never exploded publicly, but his silence spoke volumes. He had been blindsided before by someone who wore a mask on set while treating him with detachment behind the scenes. The echoes of Aunt B. Once again, the storyteller had believed in a persona that didn't match reality. But not everything in Ron Howard's life is marked by strain. Some of it, the best of it, is built on love. In 2025, he and his wife Cheryl celebrated 50 years of marriage. They were just 16 when they met. Their first date? A mint green VW Bug, a movie, and some pizza. It wasn't flashy. It was real. Cheryl didn't say yes right away. It took 3 proposals. She had dreams of her own, ambitions, a sense of independence. But eventually, she said yes. And they've been paddling the river of life together ever since. They raised 4 children. Cheryl remained the heart of the family, quietly powerful, endlessly supportive. Ron credits their enduring love not to fairy tales but to communication, mutual growth, and that quiet decision to keep choosing each other. Their daughter Bryce once said her mom was the stars, the sun, and the moon. You won't see Ron and Cheryl on tabloid covers, but theirs is the kind of Hollywood love worth celebrating. Today, Ron Howard is more than a former child star or Oscar-winning director. He's a symbol of steady evolution, of quiet integrity. He's someone who grew up in a world of illusions, learned how they worked, and still managed to build something authentic. From Mayberry's plywood houses to Hollywood's bright lights, Ron Howard has never lost sight of what matters: heart, humor, and truth. And if the Andy Griffith Show taught us anything through its goofs, its patched-together sets, and its real human flaws, it's that perfection is overrated, the sincerity that lasts. And Ron Howard, from Opie to Oscar, has never stopped telling sincere stories. If this deep dive into the hidden truths of the Andy Griffith Show and Ron Howard's incredible journey moved you, give this video a like, hit subscribe, and don't forget to ring that bell so you never miss another story from the golden age of TV and beyond. Got a favorite blooper, behind-the-scenes memory, or just want to share what Mayberry meant to you? Drop it in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. If you thought this was fascinating, stay tuned for our next episode where we uncover more untold stories from television's most iconic sets. Till next time, stay curious and keep watching with heart.